Ghost of Blackwood Hall, Chapter 3. Tracking a Thief. "New Orleans!" Bess and George exclaimed. Nancy smiled at her friends. "I'm working on a new case," she said. "Right now, I'm looking for a tall, dark man." Bess giggled. "What would Ned say to that?" Nancy blushed as she replied that the man she was after was probably a thief. Furthermore, the place to start looking for him was New Orleans. She told them the story, saying Brex's former employer should be able to recognize the craftsmanship in any imitation jewelry Brex might have made. "Dad promised me a trip," Nancy said. "I know he can't go with me now. Tonight I'll ask him if you girls can take his place. That is, if you'd like to go." "Would we?" exclaimed George. "While we're investigating this Brex person, George and I can do some sightseeing," remarked Bess. "New Orleans is such a romantic city." A twinkle came into Nancy's eyes. "I'm taking you girls along for protection," she said. "Oh, we won't desert you," George grinned. "But all work and no play isn't any fun." That evening, Nancy discussed the plan with her father. He readily gave his enthusiastic consent. Not only might a conference with Howard Brex's former employer bring results, he agreed, but there was a possibility that the suspect might even pawn the stolen articles in his hometown. "It's the most likely place for him to have a fence," declared the lawyer. As Nancy hurried to the telephone to call her friends, he warned her to be careful in following up the clue in this distant city. To Nancy's delight, George and Bess also received permission to make the trip. Hannah Gruen helped Nancy pack, while Mr. Drew made plane and hotel reservations. Before leaving, Nancy telephoned to Mrs. Putney to ask permission to take the imitation jewelry to New Orleans. "I appreciate your efforts," the widow said, "but I'm sure that nothing, I repeat, nothing good will come of this trip." "Why do you say that, Mrs. Putney?" "Last night I had another message from my departed husband. He said that the thief who stole my jewelry lost it in a large body of water, and it will never, never be recovered again." Nancy was skeptical of the widow's message, but wisely did not argue with Mrs. Putney. She simply said she would be leaving in the morning with her two friends and promised to report to the widow immediately upon her return. The next day, the three girls boarded the plane for New Orleans. The day was perfect for flying. An attractive hostess served them a tasty lunch and spent most of her spare time chatting with the three girls. Once, when the plane stopped briefly to pick up passengers, the girls alighted for a little while to stretch their legs. Upon taking their seats again, they noticed that a dark-haired woman in her late 30s had taken the empty seat next to Bess. She regarded the three intently as they sat down and smiled in a friendly manner. "Is this your first plane trip?" she asked Bess. "No," Bess replied. Then, Not wishing to be rude, she added, "We're going to New Orleans." "You love the city," the woman declared. "Where are you staying?" Bess told her. Nancy, seated in front of them, was sorry that their hotel had been named. She had wanted to keep their visit to New Orleans as secret as possible. When they reached their hotel, George scolded her cousin. "You'll never learn to be a detective, Bess," she said severely. "You can't tell who that woman on the plane might be." Nancy, acting as peacemaker, said, "Let's forget it, girls, and do some sightseeing. It's too late to call on Mr. Johnson, Howard Brex's former boss, today. We'll go there in the morning." Nancy's friends soon found that she did not intend to spend the time in mere sightseeing. Whenever she came to a jewelry shop or a pawn shop that was open, she insisted that they go in and look at the jewelry display. The trip proved to be pleasurable, if not profitable. Their inquiries led them into many sections of New Orleans. The French Quarter, where the buildings were charming in the elegance of a bygone day, interested them the most. Beautiful ironwork, delicately tinted plaster walls, old courtyards, once the center of a fashionable Italian family life, fascinated the girls. On a balcony, a bright-colored parrot chattered at them in friendly fashion. A smiling woman bearing a basket of flowers stopped to sell a flower to each girl. On all sides, the visitors saw interesting characters and heard of the soft-spoken dialect, which was a blend of Italian, Sicilian, and Italian. Bess sighed contentedly. "If I could only spend a month in this lovely city," she said. "It would be nice," Nancy agreed, "but come on, here's another shop." It was the 15th that they had visited, and even Nancy was becoming weary. She had not seen any trace of the stolen jewelry. "Let's quit," urged Bess. "I'm starving. Suppose we go to one of those famous restaurants they have around here and eat oysters baked with garlic and Italian shrimp and take on 5 pounds, scoffed George, looking with disfavor at Bess's generous weight. But the girls ate sensibly and went to bed early. In the morning, they accompanied Nancy to the jewelry firm for which Howard Brex had worked. Mr. Johnson, the head of the company, was most cooperative. He studied the imitation jewelry which Nancy showed him and compared it to some pieces of his own which Brex had made. "I'd certainly say that all of these were made by the same man," Mr. Johnson declared. Then he told the girls what he knew of his former salesman. He was a fine craftsman and made excellent designs. Mr. Johnson said, "Too bad that he got into trouble." "I understand he's been released from prison," Nancy said. "Have you any idea where he is?" "Not the slightest, but I'll be glad to let you know if I hear anything about it." Nancy left both her hotel address and that of her River Heights home. She was in a thoughtful mood as she accompanied her friends on their round of sightseeing and to lunch in a quaint restaurant. "New Orleans is wonderful," Bess exclaimed. Counting on her fingers, she added, "We've seen the banana wharf, and the market, and the garden district, and that old cemetery where all the dead are buried in tombs above the ground. That's because this place is below sea level, said George. Say, do you suppose that guide thought we believed the story about the tomb which is supposed to glow at night with an unearthly light? He said that spirits come out and weave back and forth like wisps of fog, said Bess. That's just what they are, fog, George declared practically. Oh, I don't for a minute believe in ghosts, Bess replied quickly. I wish we had time to go to Grand Isle, the haunt of Lafitte and his men, said Nancy. Who is he? Bess asked. He was a famous pirate, Nancy replied. According to tradition, when burying his treasure, he always murdered one of his band and left his ghost to guard the hidden loot. As the girls left the restaurant and started up the street, Nancy happened to turn around. Emerging from the door of the restaurant was a woman. Tune in next time for part 2 of Tracking a Thief.